and we can't deny them admission to the U.S. So that is obviously a continuing position, and we continue to implement what are our policies for allowing that to happen. But with that said, well over 99% of the individuals who are applying, are standing at a port of entry and want to enter the United States by air are documented, are holding their passports. That's been the case since we implemented on January 23rd. So you were talking about a handful of people, every day that for whatever reason, including, losing their passport while they're in Mexico, say. Those are the, the kinds of cases that we're talking about. Those are the cases that have always existed and will always exist. But the goal here really was to get the vast, vast majority of the individuals entering the United States appropriately documented.
Did you want to comment on the land, the second part of his question?
Was there going to be flexible?
Yeah. There will be flexibility at the land border as well. It's implementation at the land border is going to be a process. There is not a line that's going to be drawn on January 1st, 2008 that suddenly drops the bomb and all traffic is stopped. That is clearly not the way that we would be implementing. That would not be the responsible path forward. So there will be a process that will be discussed more openly, I think, in coming months. But we obviously do have a lot of things that we have to line up before we can clearly communicate all of those things to the public, including getting procurement actions in place that tell us exactly when we'll get cards delivered and when we'll have infrastructure in place. And also, we're pushing to have documents available even earlier. And I know the State Department's doing everything they can to do that as well. So there will be more discussed once the rule comes out and in the coming months. We obviously have ongoing work with Canada that is critical to all of this, as well as we come forward with what will be a pretty advanced public messaging campaign, as we've discussed. So those are coming.
But are the passport offices overwhelmed at this point?
I would not use the word overwhelmed, no. Challenged is a good one. Our turnaround time has gotten longer because of the demand. We did have quite an influx of work in a very short amount of time, and that's what we're dealing with right now. But we are committed to getting everybody a passport in time for their trip. We are hiring people on a daily basis, and we did anticipate this. We've been talking about WHTI for quite a while now, and as I said, we've expanded a lot of our infrastructure already. We've hired 300 people. We need to get them. We need to get more people on board, obviously, but we're right now in the summer travel rush as well. So. And the card, we will have passports available for people. We do want to ensure that the passport card meets all security and privacy standards before we issue it, and that's why we have the robust procurement schedule that we have. The passports are available to U.S. citizens right now, and they fully meet the requirements of WHTI. The passport card we will have hopefully available in the spring of '08, and will be an option to the passport, but the passport is available right now for people who need to travel across borders, and will be. So we are prepared to ramp up even more. I think I mentioned earlier we're looking at over 20 million people. Frankly, the U.S. population traditionally has not. It's used to be maybe 20% of the U.S. population had passports. We're now up to about 28-29% of the U.S. population. We're issuing 1.5 million passports every single month. So we certainly have met the challenge, and maybe not as smooth as we'd like it right now because of the summer rush as well. But we fully intend to implement Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative. We are doing that now, and I think it attests to the 99% compliance rate at the airports. People do have passports, and a lot of them are going to Mexico, by the way. So hopefully they'll have passports to go to Tijuana as well as Cancun.
And hopefully when they come back as well.
Yeah,
Well, congratulations on ramping up to such a big increase. That's really very impressive, Ann. Last question from our gentleman from Mexico, representing Mexico.
I'll take advantage for being the only Mexican in the room. So I want to ask to Ms. Barrett about How many offices does the State Department has for issuing passports in border communities, U.S. border communities in the Mexican border? And what has been the pace, if there's of any increase for demand for passports in those border communities? And second, for the woman at DHS, whether they have detected any increase of use of passport when Americans are crossing into the U.S. back. Is there any increase at all? I'm Jose Diaz with Reforma newspaper from Mexico. I'm sorry.
In terms of, we have acceptance facilities. We have thousands along the southern border as well as the northern border. I can't tell you the exact figure, but the total throughout the country of acceptance facilities is about 8,500. And those are post offices, courts, where people can apply for passports. Nationwide, we have 18 facilities, and that we do have an office in Houston, and one in Los Angeles, one in New Orleans. Those are about the only facilities. But our process basically depends on people applying at their local post offices and courts, and then those are transferred to our agencies for adjudication and processing. We also, obviously, Houston, that's one of the facilities I was mentioning. We've expanded. We added a whole floor for people walking in who needed emergency and expedited travel. So we certainly have opened a lot more facilities along both borders to accommodate people and encourage people to go in and use those facilities to apply in plenty of time so they can get their documentation.
With respect to what we see at the borders, actually since September 11th, there's been an increase in individuals carrying their passports crossing the land borders. I don't have the statistics to tell you whether we've seen an increase, in the last 6 months due to WHTI implementation at AIR. We can certainly get that. I just haven't seen it actually. I will say too, we've seen an increase in individuals crossing with documents that are machine readable, and that we're increasing the queries that we are doing at the land border crossings in anticipation of WHTI and in talking about trying to increase security. So we're doing more targeting and trying to at least do queries on individuals coming into the U.S. But without the RFID technology, getting much past 50% is a huge challenge there. So that's another reason why we're really pushing for implementation here.
There's just an extra point I'd like to make. During the interviews that I conducted, it was interesting to hear that the Guadalajara consular office for the United States was experiencing an enormous rush by U.S. citizens resident in Mexico, particularly in the Lake Chapala region. And these are people who have traditionally been able to cross over, live in Mexico without a passport, and now they're wanting to return home. They're having to apply for the passport in order to get back. And so that's one of the little sort of, not points of tension, but it's one of the sort of the amber lights of what's going on for U.S. offices in Mexico.
Any other comments from our panelists? Well, thank you all for your questions. Just an observation that, basically WHTI does not need to be an obstacle. It can, in fact, be a catalyst to strengthening our ability to identify the travelers and to facilitate commerce and trade across our borders. I'm going to be handing it back to Michael, but I did want to, first of all, thank David for hosting us here at the Woodrow Wilson Center, for Dr. Michael Hawes, his team at Fulbright, and the North American Network on North America, certainly our panels and our authors. Thank you so much for joining us today. Truly appreciate it. I'd also like to thank my team at Accenture. They did a phenomenal job working with the Fulbright Foundation and developing this paper and supporting the effort there. And last but not least, to all of you who came to our friends and neighbors who came to talk to us today. Please allow Michael to have a few minutes just to summarize, and thank you again for coming.
Thank you, Gail, and thank you, everybody. I realize you've been very patient. We've gone on for a little longer than we anticipated, but there, as my father used to say, there was much to say. So we at the Foundation, I think at Accenture, and I'm sure at the Canada Institute, hope that this event, and indeed the white paper, will contribute to a more sophisticated understanding of this issue. It has been a long road, as my father also used to say. I was sitting just 4 years ago at a Prime Minister's dinner, the so-called Maple Leaf dinner in Ottawa. And it happened that our board chair had funded and paid for the meal, so I was sitting at the Prime Minister's table. And that was the day after the West Wing had aired an episode where the terrorists had crossed the border from Canada into the United States. Thank you again, by the way. Now the terrorists crossed, and I'll remember this quite distinctly, they crossed the Ontario-Vermont border. We all sat at that table that night and we drafted a letter signed by the Prime Minister of Canada sent to the producers of the West Wing ensuring that under no circumstances would we ever allow terrorists to cross that Ontario-Vermont border. It troubled us more than a little, though, that people didn't know there was no border between Ontario and Vermont, and we have indeed come a long way since those days. We hope that this will encourage wider debate and, better still, further action. With respect to grassroots, over the last 2 days since we did our event in Ottawa, we have, the authors, Gail, myself, been on the phone night and day. While I was lost on the way home from Bristol last night, experienced rural Virginia, we were also on a BC Nightline CBC show. We have attracted attention in every major media market in Canada. We have spoken quite specifically to people in Regina, in Calgary, in Vancouver, in St. John's, in Ottawa, and in Toronto. All the major dailies picked up this story, and all of them are quite interested. We continue to do on-air news stories of this issue. The NASC, and I thank Marianne for reminding us this is an academic event. Indeed, the Fulbright is an academic program. Our goal is to encourage understanding through exchange. We want to move people. We want to have more events in rooms like this where there's a healthy dialogue and debate between Canadians and Americans. But it is a grassroots organization, and the NASC is a grassroots organization. We, the executive vice president, academic vice president of the University of Winnipeg is on the NASC council. My good friend and former foreign minister, Lloyd Axworthy, he and I had a long discussion about this topic over dinner at his home. We have had events at the University of Winnipeg. We engage and hope to engage scholars from every part of all three countries in these kinds of initiatives. The Canada-U.S. issue. This is about Canada-U.S. relations. It's about the North American community. It's about developing a deeper and more nuanced understanding. But, and I think Marianne was right to raise this, and Kevin has explained this to me, I'm a little thick, but he's explained this to me many times. The reality is there is a specialness in the North American relationship, and indeed, we in Canada frequently talk about the special relationship between Canada and the United States. Part of that specialness has been about the unfettered access Canadians have had to the United States. It has been genuinely special. And I noted the authors brought this up, and I've been there myself, driving over the bridge going to the Bills game. You know, I just said, I'm going to the Bills game, you know. And of course, they waved me through. Or dragging out my Blockbuster card, which is all I had in my wallet that day, and they looked at it, admittedly a little puzzled, but across we went. My apologies to the Canadian government, but not much more than a year ago, I went across the border in Gananoque, Ontario, with two senior officials from the Canadian government and myself. The border guard asked what we all did for a living. The guy driving the car said, well, two of us work for the Canadian government, and one doesn't. The border guard looked at him and said, which one of you two poor bastards work for the Canadian government? So there is still some flexibility at the borders, and we probably shouldn't forget that this is about people. The most important person in the chain is still the person in the chain. I also want to, and I can't help myself because I am an academic, a longtime professor of international politics, having taught in both of these countries. I can't help noticing we use slightly different intonation on this acronym. Years ago, I was teaching at the Institute for Oriental Culture in Tokyo, and a man was called to the inner circle of the Grand Sumo, a man that I called Konoshiki. Konoshiki happened to be born in Hawaii, So it depends what your editorial position was. At Kokusai Kenzai, they called him Chad Rowan. They refused to give him a Japanese name. They claimed he was an American, and in no circumstances should he be ever called to the inner circle. Those people who supported him called him Koshiki, and indeed he could be called the inner circle. Now, why is that important? Well, it's the witty. Witty sounds so upbeat, urbane, cosmopolitan. Wheaty sounds much more grounded. It's all about the heartland. It's wheaties. The reality is there are differences. It is a complex issue, it is a complex problem, and it reflects a number of different realities. We have been fortunate to help us today understand the witty debate. Dr. Donald Abelson, who heads up the Center for American Studies at the University of Western Ontario, Duncan Wood from ITAM in Mexico, and our three distinguished panelists. We were, I think, all extremely impressed with your ability to provide thoughtful and careful discussion of what is a difficult topic. So thank you all for your patience and for helping us, I hope, to shed just a little more light on the North American relationship.